Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast alongside Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick, and we're back with our position preview series on offense with the wide receivers. And Joey, this obviously is a unit that lost a lot from last season, whether it's Will Sheppard, London Humphreys, Jade McGowan. There's some talented players that you lost, a lot of speed, just dynamic guys, and especially London Humphreys. London Humphreys was the guy that I did not expect Vanderbilt to lose, of course, but that's what happened, and Vanderbilt has to replace him somehow. How do they do that? How do they do that this year, Joey?
Well, the talent level certainly isn't as high in this room this year, and I'm still struggling to find answers as to how they replaced London Humphreys, how they replaced Will Sheppard. There was obviously some issues with Will Sheppard down the stretch there, but it's a really talented guy. They don't have anybody near that talented, I don't think. They have some fine guys, but Billy, I've got some real questions about this group and their ability to kind of replace what Vandy had. I think the good news for Vanderbilt in the receiver room, I don't know if they're going to be relied upon the way they were last year. I think they were kind of banking on their offense being able to throw it down the field last year, and they couldn't. This year, I think it's a much different looking offense, and I don't think they're going to have to air it out 30 yards to be productive consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one silver lining, but you just look at this room, there's no Will Sheppard, there's no London Humphreys. Quincy Skinner, I think, is a good player. I have my questions about his availability, and he's never had a game above 100 yards in his career receiving. Junior Sherrill, I think I have my questions with as well, but I think he's had a good camp. As a whole, though, especially outside of those two guys, they just haven't seemed to get much separation throughout much of fall camp, and I haven't seen a whole lot of guys stand out on a day-to-day basis. Loic Fungi has made some plays, but still kind of struggling to get separation. I think their freshmen have done some good things, but obviously they're freshmen, and it's not a London Humphreys, Junior Sherrill type freshman in my eyes in that class. So I've got my questions, and I think their transfer class really has some things to prove, and they haven't done that thus far. Darian Wiley's been out for a lot of the time, but, I mean, even the guys who have been on the field have seemed to struggle for a lot of camp.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the weakest unit on the team, I think. I look at this position in tiers. That first tier is Skinner and Sherrill. Those two guys will likely lead the receivers in receiving yards. And in your story that you just put out, you make a not a bold statement that the tight ends might be more important targets than even the receivers. And you made a really good note in your 3-2-1 today. But I think you look at this group, like I said, with the tiers, Skinner and Sherrill, and then the transfers, Fungi and Wiley, who really haven't done a ton in fall camp. It's fall camp, though. Maybe. You know, we can't jump to conclusions.
Had some production in the past.
Yeah, we can't jump to conclusions there. That's the second tier. Third tier are the younger guys, the freshmen, Tristan Brown, Micah Bell. I would still categorize as a younger guy. He's a little bit older, of course. And then Joseph McVeigh. You still have Bosky Barrett in there as well. So, you know, who's going to step up? You know, is it a transfer here, a freshman here? Because I think we know what we're going to get for the most part from Skinner and Sherrill. You know, they'll be consistent. They're not going to be.
Well, I think Skinner is a big X factor for them too. If he can stay on the field and take a leap like they think he can, that's a big thing. But I'm not sure that has fully mounted throughout his career thus far. But he's super gifted.
Yeah, he really is. I think he's a good player. He just can't stay healthy. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. Junior Sherrill might be the best receiver on the team. I'm pretty close to saying he's the best receiver on the team. He's been really impressive in fall camp. I think he has built a connection with Diego Pavia that will be interesting to watch. There's just not a lot there. There's not a ton of proven depth there. But what I want to get at, Joey, is within this offense, you don't need dynamic, sexy receivers. You'd love to have them, right? If you asked Tim Beck, you know, would you like to have an A.J. Green type and an A.J. Brown and elite SEC receivers on your team? Yeah, you know, they would certainly take them. But at Vanderbilt, you don't get those guys every day, right? You know, it's not every recruiting class where you find a Jordan Matthews 2-star, you know, diamond out of the rough, and he turns into an NFL receiver. You know, and they've had good receivers in the past, but I just look at this room, and what they're asked to do within this offense is very different than most other SEC schools and maybe every other SEC school. You know, they'll have to block a lot more, of course. They'll be coming in motion. I think that's something to watch. You know, who are the receivers that you're seeing in motion? That a lot of times will tell you, okay, they'll get the ball eventually on that end around or on that jet sweep. And I think those two guys are probably Sherrill, Tristan Brown as well will likely be in there. But I just look at that, Joey, what there has to do within this offense. There's not a ton of pressure on them to go, hey, we need you to catch a 50, 60-yard deep ball today, right? I mean, you'd love that, but there's not that pressure on them to do that. It's more intermediate, it's more play action, it's more possession-type guys, and that's kind of what you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to have guys streaking down the field all game like they did last year. I mean, that's where Junior Cheryl had a lot of his production, is when they would air it out towards the end of games and try to get some points back, and Junior Cheryl would be open down the field. I think he's developed into maybe more of a complete receiver, and that's the good news here. And also the good news is, like you said, the offense is much different. I think the offense is really suited for a guy like Richie Hoskins, who we haven't talked about yet, to where maybe in the shorter intermediate game, he can make more of an impact, because, last year he wasn't going to be a guy who was a game wrecker, but now that they're throwing 7, 10-yard passes more consistently rather than airing it out way down the field, Hoskins can be a guy who makes some plays, and they're going to have some guys who can get some yards after the reception. I think McVay's done a nice job with that through camp, although McVay, I don't know if he's faced off against 1s or 2s very often. Tristan Brown, I think, can do some good things. Barrett can do some good things. But, man, you're looking at this receiver room, and compared to what you were looking at last year, it's like, man, I'm a little nervous about what they've got there. And like I said, I'll stand by this. I have a hard time seeing, barring injury, that a tight end is not a guy who has the most receiving yards and or receptions at the end of the year. Maybe Cheryl, maybe Skinner, if it all comes together for him. I think that's a huge thing for this room. Can Quincy Skinner put it all together? Because we know he's got the ability. We know he can run routes at a pretty high level at times. We know he can go up and get it. But can he put it all together and be a complete player? Can he have that 1 or 2 game stretch where he's breaking out? And can that be a more consistent thing? Like I said, he hasn't had a game in his career above 100 yards. He's changed the way he's taking care of his body. And it seems like he's a lot farther along mentally than he was in the past. So I do have some optimism with Skinner and Cheryl, but otherwise, Fungi has been okay. I think it'll help him that he's got to block a little bit to get on the field. I think maybe that can bring his snap count up. He can be a red zone guy for them maybe. Jeremiah Dillon's been out for a lot of camp and really didn't show a whole lot when he was out there. Micah Bell, I think, has a lot of work to do learning the position. Darian Wiley, I think, is a big question mark for me as well. Interested to see him at the end of fall camp if he's out there. But right now, not a whole lot from that transfer class. I think a lot of it's going to be on the freshmen. A lot of it's going to be on Richie Hoskins. And I'm not sure who the wide receiver 3 is, Billy. I think maybe it's Richie Hoskins. Maybe it's Loic Fungi. Maybe it's Darian Wiley. Maybe it's a freshman. I don't know. But none of those options really excite me like their wide receiver 3 being Jaden McGowan or London Humphreys did last year.
Yeah, losing McGowan and Humphreys both surprised me. I could have seen losing one of those guys, but you gotta work with what you got. And if you're Tim Beck, you've got to be really creative with how you get these guys the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not too many receivers on this team that can go beat an SEC defensive back on a 50, 60-yard deep ball. London Humphreys could do that last year. I think Will Shepherd, he was a good receiver. He could do that as well. I even think McGowan.
Yeah.
When you line them up, all 3 of those guys could go make plays.
Those were guys you were scared of.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have
nobody really
guys.
scares you in this unit other than maybe Cheryl and Skinner at times. Both of those guys have to stay healthy, and if Skinner doesn't stay healthy, I really have a hard time seeing this group have success this year. But again, we have to remember within this offense and this scheme, they are not relied upon heavily. They're just not. I mean, you look at New Mexico State last year. It could have been 4, 5, 6 different guys throughout a game catching a football, and it really didn't matter. They didn't really have Stowers was the go-to, like I've mentioned before, but they had other guys that just did their job and worked within the offense and moved the chains. This isn't an offense that's going to score 40 points a game, probably closer to 25, 30. I mean, if we're being real honest, But that I don't think that has to be a negative. Like I don't, if you can move the chains and make defenses really work to have to defend you, then your receiver group can do enough. But again, this obviously is not the best unit on the team. I do think when you look at Wiley and Fungi, they could also be X factors. Maybe they're just bad practice players. I mean, guys like that have come across here before. So we'll see. Interesting unit, not the best unit, like I just said, on the team, but Joey, an important one. A unit that's going to have to step up for this team to do what they want to do this year. So that's the receiver group. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick, and we will keep it rolling with the offensive line coming up right here on the Vandy Sports Podcast.